Welcome to 40 Fit Radio, where we bring you science-based, common sense information regarding fitness, health, and lifestyle for the 40-plus community. I'm your host, Darren Deaton, doctor of physical therapy with 28 years clinical practice experience, starting strength coach, and certified CrossFit trainer. Forty Fit Radio, real people, real fitness, real health.
Welcome back to the 40 Fit Radio podcast. This is your host, Trent Jones, and Triple D.
Good morning.
So we're blowing and going on our foundation series. What we're calling these first 10 episodes or so is just setting the foundations for fitness and health. We've talked about strength, we've talked about conditioning, we've talked about mobility. Today, we're going to talk about something that impacts all of these. It's nutrition.
Yeah, and this could be a Pandora's box. Trent and I were talking about this earlier, how that this, there are a whole podcast series on nothing but nutrition, lifestyle habits, nutrition, macros, diets, everything. And so our goal with the Foundation series, the first 10 podcasts of the 40 Fit Radio podcast, is to basically give you a 30,000-foot view on some of the things that you need to be aware of as a master's, and then we're going to dig deeper and deeper and deeper and get farther into the weeds on these subjects as we go into future podcasts and we bring other content experts in. But the goal is we want you to have a basic awareness. You could always go back to these first 10 podcasts and say, what are the key elements, the key foundations to a quality, healthy lifestyle, fit lifestyle for masters? And so today our goal is to not give you this specific diet plan, this specific nutrition plan, how many macros you particularly need to eat alone to get to where you want to go. The goal is, first of all, to basically just set the stage for future episodes and get farther and farther into the topic of nutrition.
Yeah, this is Nutrition 101. We'll have 201, 301, et cetera, later on down the road.
3001.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things we can talk about, but I think in the interest of keeping it simple, we're going to approach this from the direction of food is fuel for our bodies.
Correct.
Fuel for our training, fuel for our physical activity. And nutrition and diet is simply what we eat.
Absolutely.
It's how we get the fuel into our bodies.
Yeah, and I think people want to complicate this subject, and it is a very complex subject as we dive farther and farther into it. But I think the key here is that basically food is for support and fuel for your body. Nutrition and diet are what we eat. Let's talk a little bit about the difference between. I mean, when we look out in the human stratosphere right now of diets and programs, I mean, there's a book on every shelf, and there's a guru for every body type, every chemical makeup, every blood type, and basically, when we think about it, there's basically two types of nutritional programs. There's lifestyle programs, and then there's just true diets. Lifestyle programs basically look to create change in the way you live based off habits and education, so that you then eat a healthier nutritional diet. And then diets basically are geared towards weight loss. And it's a program that you do for a period of time, and then you go back to, hopefully they educate you, some do, some don't, and then you go back to some other eating habit, And so good examples of lifestyle diets might be the paleo diet, Whole30, the Zone. Those are diets that highly rely on you learning about nutrition as support for human living, healthy living, and fuel and performance. And then you adapt your habits to those nutritional programs, those lifestyle programs.
Right. But they're not prescribing specifically on day one you eat 6 ounces of salmon. On day two, it's
not
simply,
necessarily.
Right,
No.
It's simply a guidelines for let's choose these types of foods over these.
Yeah, and in those three models, as an example, there's different levels of rigidity. If you like to measure and you're good with numbers and you like specific metrics, then the zone is probably going to be more your type of diet, because you are going to measure. You're going to measure everything you eat to the macro level, to the gram level, and to the calorie. But if you're more into just the quality of foods that you eat and using a basic portion control, basic total caloric value model, then paleo might be better. It's going to be more restrictive on what you can't or cannot eat. It's going to limit almost all grains, dairy products, those types of things. But at the same time, it's a little easier to adhere to if you're not a measurement-oriented person. And so there are different models for different types of personalities and different types of individuals. But then you've got classical diets, like let's say Atkins or Medifast, Jenny Craig, Weight Watchers. I think Jenny Craig and Weight Watchers, I don't know those programs real well, but they're a little bit more lifestyle oriented. But I think by and large, people will go back to their bad habits, if they don't have a true habit change,
right,
and we don't drive human behavior among all things. So as a master's, if you're out there and you're looking at your body composition, it's not where it's at, then probably your nutrition is driving that first and your lifestyle habits. But then also it could be your training model. You could be, and I'll just tell you, you want to drive weight loss, or more importantly, body composition change, train with strength training, because that drives muscle mass growth, and muscle as a cell type burns more calories than fat does.
Yeah, and I think that's an important distinction. Sometimes in the popular media, a lot of us talk about weight loss, but I think what we really mean when we say we want to lose weight is what we really mean is we want to lose body fat.
Right, sure.
And this is, I think, an important distinction, because when we're talking about organizing our nutrition around our goals, sometimes that might involve gaining weight because we want to gain muscle mass to get stronger. Sometimes it might involve losing weight because we want to lose some body fat and for recomposition. But when we say gain weight, we mean all tissue.
Yeah, that's a very generic statement, which has quite a few details in it,
right?
And those details are built off of what kind of weight gain, what kind of weight loss, and like you said, body composition, recomposition, all those things combined. I tell my clients when they start with me for a fitness program, we discuss this in the first session. I ask them, what do you want to do with your body composition?
Yeah.
Do you want to gain muscle mass? Do you want to maintain muscle mass? Do you want to gain? Some people need to gain a little body fat. They're too lean. Or do you want to lose body fat? We start with that.
Right.
And then especially with my female clients, it's more of a struggle because they're more interested in what they weigh than what it's composed of.
Right.
And I basically ask them, if you weighed 130 and you look like you weighed 120, would you really care how much you weighed? In other words, if you look as good as you did when you were 120 because you have a hard body and you're muscular and you've got good body composition, but it's just made up of more muscle, then what does it matter if you weigh 120 or 130? But I'm going to tell you that like you said, the elephant in the room, that's a huge problem with the females that we train, is that human perception of, I got to weigh this. Well, maybe you need to weigh. Maybe it's more about. Well, it is more about body composition than it is what you need to weigh. I know some women that weigh 150, and they look fitter and leaner than women that weigh 130.
Yeah.
And they look better. They look actually like they have less body fat, and they do overall because they have just a ton of muscle mass.
Right.
And
so let's just quickly get that out of the way. When we gain weight, in general, we're gaining a combination of lean tissue, which includes muscle mass. It includes bone mass. Let's not forget this, especially if we're strength training, we're strengthening our bones. They get denser.
Increasing the density of the bone.
And that is a significant component of the lean tissue that we're building. Right. And we're also gaining some fat. Right. In varying degrees, right? And so our training, for instance, if we are strength training, that is going to skew the percentage of that weight gain so if we gain 1 pound, strength training is going to skew the percentage of that 1 pound towards lean tissue.
Correct.
And less fat. Whereas if we weren't strength training, we're gaining weight, we're probably going to be gaining more fat and less lean tissue. Now, conversely, when we lose weight, we're losing a combination of fat and muscle mass. So our training helps us prioritize losing more fat
Right.
and less and as little muscle mass as possible. But physiologically, just in general, these are the two things that are happening when we gain weight or lose weight. So I think that's why we want to be more specific with our goals and say we want to gain muscle mass, we want to lose body fat, rather than simply the absolute number on the scale.
Right. It matters where the client is when they come in. If they're someone that's morbidly obese, and we're trying to gain strength too, then we might be on a novice linear progression strength program, but we also might be throwing some conditioning in there to increase the caloric burn, to increase the caloric consumption, and then we're controlling their macronutrients to drive. We're making sure, number one, that we're driving their protein level, so we're getting more protein, and we're reducing the carbohydrate load.
Right.
So we're basically reducing the sugar that they're eating for fuel and the fat that they're eating for fuel, and we're increasing the protein level, and then we're also driving some more activity so that their overall consumption throughout the day of calories is greater than it was before.
Right.
So the body composition change that we're going for there is maybe a slight increase in muscle mass gain, and it might be a little slower gain because of the way we're controlling their diet, but we're getting more fat loss along the way.
Right.
No matter what, a body with more muscle burns more fat. Plain and simple. It's a bigger factory for consuming fuel. And I think that that's important for people to understand and to get in their head. So, when we talk about diet, Trent, we're the key thing is I always tell my clients, don't get complicated to start with. Let's do this the simple, redneck, educated way. So, first of all,
It's the only way I learn.
yeah, man. First of all, whole foods. Start with whole foods. That's key. That's one concept I tell all of my trainees, all of my clients. Whole foods. Reduce the processed foods in your diet. Get rid of the high calorie sugar loads, corn fructose syrup, whatever form it comes in. Get rid of the foods that are in a package and then have 100 different ingredients on the label that you can't even, not only can you don't know what they are, but you can't pronounce them. Get the junk out of your diet first. You've always heard about shopping on the perimeters of the grocery store, and even that you have to be careful with. But I think in general, we want to go to whole foods.
Yeah.
Fruits and vegetables that are whole foods, good, lean, quality, organic meats, nuts and seeds. Those are the types of things that we want to start with. And we can do that just by cleaning our pantry out and getting rid of the junk.
Yeah.
But that creates habit change. You have to have a habit change. And I think that's the key. And so, number one, it would be whole foods, right?
Yeah, I think I've also heard people refer to that as single ingredients, right?
Yeah,
so
that's great.
If you look at, if you think about a given thing you're going to cook, how many ingredients does it have?
A sweet potato is made from a
sweet potato.
Yeah.
One ingredient. But now, if you're talking about the sweet potato casserole.
Right.
Oh, yeah, multiple ingredients there. So
let's some brown sugar.
Yeah. But so if we have so we eat the sweet potato, not the sweet potato casserole. So it's single ingredients.
And it's easier. When you think about it, in regards to your lifestyle habits, it's easier. For lunch, you're going to have, 4 to 6 ounces of a chicken breast, a handful of broccoli, and then you're going to have on a salad. And on the salad, you're going to have some oil and vinegar dressing or some balsamic vinaigrette, or something like that. And so, it just makes it simpler. So we want to whole foods first. We want to reduce the processed sugars, get rid of the sugars, and that also may also mean reducing some of the higher sugar foods that come in packaged forms like breads and chips and potato chips and grain-based foods. Those are just high calorie dense foods. And so if we're driving weight loss or even sometimes better quality of life, we're going to reduce the intake of some of those high calorie foods and some of those grains too. And different lifestyle diets and diets will control the intake of grains in varying levels. We're not going to get into that in today's show, but I would just say that if you're in the weight loss mode and you want to gain muscle mass, you can get your carbohydrates from other good sources. And so it doesn't have to be from, white bread. But if you're a young trainee and we're trying to put a lot of mass on you, I might have you eat a lot of white bread, and I might have you eat, drink a bunch of milk per day, gallon of milk a day, GOMAD or whatever. But the goal is we want to improve the quality of foods for the average masters. The other thing is portion control. We got to learn in the Western Hemisphere, we biggie size everything. Everything, everything's bigger.
Super size me.
Yeah, exactly. Everything's bigger. So portion control is key there. And we'll talk about how much is driven by your total caloric load. But we'll talk about that in future episodes too, the specifics of portion control. But we all need to be getting enough of the basic macronutrients.
Yeah.
Proteins, which are food stuff that build tissue. Carbohydrates, which are used for fuel. That's your sugars, your glucose. And fats, which are basically for fuel and protection of your organs and body system. And they do some other things, lubrication. And lubrication is everything. So, I could tell you how many calories per gram you need of those, but why? That's not important at this point. What's important is that you understand which foods are what, at a basic educational level. You ought to be able to walk into a grocery store or a restaurant or even in a fast food chain and say, that's protein, that's sugar, that's carbohydrate, and that's fat.
Right.
And that's a basic educational understanding level.
And that's where, that's where eating whole foods makes this process a lot simpler because, once you start to dive into the nutritional labels, it can be quite surprising which processed foods have, for instance, a lot of sugar in them. You think you eat a piece of what's labeled wheat bread.
Right.
Some of that bread might have
corn fructose syrup.
A bunch of high fructose corn syrup in it. Yeah. It might have a lot of oils in it.
Sure.
And whereas you think of, a piece of bread, that's some grain, so refined a little bit. You might not even think about the fact that you're consuming a lot of sugar along with that.
Right.
So again, that's where consuming whole foods really helps us hone in on what we're eating, right? We eat a potato, we know we're eating some starches, carbohydrates, we eat a pice of meat, mostly protein. So
some nuts and seeds, oils, and a little bit of protein, but mostly fat. So and I think we want to drive your habits by some basic understanding and knowledge. And the other thing is you have to decide early on whether you're in the gain, the loss, or the maintain mode of body fat. And that's going to drive your caloric load too. It's going to drive your basal metabolic rate. We're going to talk about that here in just a second. But, the key thing too, I always tell people is this is a little nugget that'll be in our pearls. It'll be in our 40 Fit Pearls at the end of the podcast, but drive your diet by your protein level first. Protein is key. That's the number one thing. Drive your caloric intake by how much protein you need to get based on the outcome, what you're doing. If you're gaining muscle mass, you're probably going to be eating 1 to 1.5 grams of protein per pound of body weight, at least. And so that's going to drive all your other macronutrients. If you're in the weight loss mode and you're trying to lose some body fat, we're going to make sure your protein's high. We might drop your carbohydrates down some. So the ratio of carbohydrates is going to fall a little bit. But we're also going to be looking at your total basal metabolic rate, and that is how much, what is the caloric need of your body when at rest? When just doing basic functions of life, how many calories a day? Calorie represents basically, 1 kilocalorie is, there's a scientific formula.
A unit of energy.
Right. It's a unit of energy. It's what your body needs for it's the metric level for your body's caloric value. And so, the basal metabolic rate is how many calories a day do you need just to sustain basic life function? Then we have your activity-based metabolic rate, which is based off of how much training, how many other activities per day are you doing recreationally in your life, sports, whatever else, plus your basal metabolic rate. And then we add a factor to that. And then that's going to give us a total caloric need for the day. If we go over those calories, it's very likely we're going to store that. If we go under those calories, it's very likely that we're going to burn that off. And guess what? We're going to have a deficit and we're going to lose body fat, hopefully, unless we under protein.
Right.
And if we under protein, we might lose muscle mass.
Yeah.
That's the key thing to understand. You can be losing some body weight and it not be the right type of composition.
Right.
That's key. So what we eat is important. How much we eat of it is important too. Calories in, calories out, yes. But also we want to be assured that we're eating the right type of calories in our diet. So plain and simple, you can't exercise off a bad diet. If you're a master's and you think you're going to exercise off a bad diet and you're complaining about the little bit of body fat in your middle section around your abdominal area or in your hips or wherever it is, your nutrition supports your body composition, plain and simple. Or it hurts it. It either helps it or hurts it. And, also the way you train will help to drive your body composition, which can then augment that and improve your caloric burn, improve the way you look, everything. So I think one of the key things to remember here as a master's is that concept that you can't exercise off a poor diet. We hear that a lot, but we don't really internalize that and believe that, because psychologically we go into the gym and we think, I'm going to do some cardio today, man. I got to burn some calories. I was out all last night. You're not going to burn off enough calories to burn off the one mixed drink you had that was really high in sugar.
Yeah.
You're just not going to
Or that, the 450 calorie triple macchiato with caramel
at
Starbucks, right?
I think the key is you need to have a basic understanding of, first of all, that this is all going to be driven by your habits and your lifestyle. And second of all, what are the food macronutrients? What are they good for? What do you need them for? What is your total caloric load requirement per day based on your goal, whether you want a calorie surplus for training, whether you want a calorie deficit for weight loss, or whether you want a calorie balance for maintaining. You've got to figure out what is the driven outcome based on to support what your nutritional level is going to be.
Yeah, so let's talk about a couple of examples of trainees that we've coached.
Sure.
Because I see in very, in oversimplified terms, I see one of two types of people come into the gym. And again, I'm coming at this from a strength bias, primarily teaching people how to strength train. But I think it applies generally to the general population as well. And that is, I see training example number one is an underweight male, right? In particular, I tend to see the younger males being underweight, but also we'll see some
I had a
masters.
master's the other day come in. He was 5'11". He weighed 150 pounds.
Exactly, right? Very common. And sometimes we see this with endurance athletes who have a need to keep a low body weight for their sport, but sometimes they might be underweight just given for their strength level.
Sure.
And so with that type of trainee, generally they need to gain weight,
right?
And they're under eating on protein.
Right. Sure.
And there's kind of a couple of things at play there. So number one, they need to gain weight for a variety of reasons. Number one, you can't build muscle mass if you're not gaining weight. Right. And they need to gain muscle mass to build the strength. On top of that, there's a certain level of body mass you need to effectively utilize the levers of your body.
Right.
If you're underweight, then you simply don't have enough tissue around your joints for them to be maximally useful and maximally strong.
Well, people that are heavier, not just because they have more muscle mass, there's many factors. People that are heavier are generally stronger. I mean,
right.
I remember I was in the gym at Wichita Falls just recently and talking to Rip, and he looked at me and said, "You need to get a bigger belly and you'll squat and deadlift more."
Right.
I was like, "But I don't want a bigger belly. I like my flat stomach."
So I'm a big fan of strongman.
Yeah.
And probably the number one, the most well-known strongman competition is stone loading.
Right.
And you look at all the top strongmen and they have they call it the power belly, right?
Right.
And it's because it helps them give them some leverage on that stone as they're trying to lift it up and get it up on top of a pedestal.
Well, it's physics.
Right?
It's physics. When you weigh more, the object you're lifting disrupts your weight less.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
mass moves mass.
Yeah, exactly. It's pure physics. Now, I think for our average population, the average master's population, the trainee that's underweight or the client that's underweight, we are probably we're wanting to drive muscle mass first, but we're going to add some body fat along the way.
Right.
The great thing about when we work with trainees is we have methods and metrics. We have certain measurements that we follow, the abdominal measurement, thigh measurements, shoulder and chest measurements, where we can look and see where the weight gain is occurring and ensuring that, okay, and I could use skin fat calipers, I could use body immersion, I could use a bod pod, but I could measure their body, or a DEXA scan, I could measure their body fat too, their composition, body composition, and I can see where that gain is coming from. So I very commonly will tell a client, hey, your abdominal measurement has minimally changed,
right,
but you're 7 pounds heavier. That's mostly muscle mass.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's important for them to know that, especially our female clients.
Absolutely. So with this trainee, generally what I find is when you look at the nutritional habits is that, we prescribe for this, let's take our underweight male example. He's 5'10", 160 pounds, 150 pounds. We're going to tell him, you need to be eating 200 grams of protein a day.
Right.
Because, going off the 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, right, we're trying to drive muscle growth. So we're going to prescribe more than his current body weight because we know he needs to gain weight.
Yeah,
right?
and we want a little bit of a surplus there, and that surplus caloric intake will just go to storage.
Exactly. So, but what we often find in practice is that if this trainee begins to track his macro intake, it's 75 grams of protein a day.
Sure.
So that's one example that we see often. I'd say the other example is the overweight trainee.
Right.
Where we've got a different problem there, right?
Sure.
So again, we are trying to drive muscle mass growth. We're trying to drive strength increases, but they already have quite a bit of muscle mass just because they're carrying around a lot of tissue.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they may still be under strength. They still may need more strength, and so they've got a body composition issue that is the exact opposite of the underweight trainee. They've got potentially too much body fat and not enough muscle mass, but we're generally starting with a larger factory of muscle mass with them than we are the underweight trainee. And so our program might be a little different. We might significantly reduce their carbohydrate, their sugar load, and their fat load, but we're still going to keep that protein fairly high, but it's going to be under what we would normally give an underweight trainee.
Right.
So we're getting a total caloric deficit on that individual, and on the other individual, we're getting a caloric surplus. And so there is some calories in, calories out model
Absolutely.
working there.
In both cases, you'll notice the protein stays high.
That's the key thing. And I tell individuals, it's not just, it is to get strong. That's the key. That's why we build muscle mass. But a more muscular body burns more calories.
Absolutely. Now, we have a problem that we're going to have to confront, whether we are an overweight trainee or an underweight trainee. And that problem is this. Physiologically, we can't have our cake and eat it too.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
As I mentioned before, we're either, if we're gaining weight, we're gaining both muscle and body fat. Hopefully more muscle than body fat because we're training appropriately. If we're losing weight, we're losing muscle and body fat at the same time. So oftentimes we'll see with somebody who is just in the novice phase of their strength training, you've got to make a choice. And that choice is, are you going to give yourself the fuel that you need to get strong, which may result in a little bit more body fat than you want?
Sure.
Certainly not a lot
in there.
Right. There's a buy-in period. Now
Yeah.
we're absolutely not saying that we need to gain a complete excess of body weight and body fat.
And we can measure that along the way.
Right. That's why we're tracking the waist
Abdominal
measurements
yes.
making sure nothing's getting out of hand. But sometimes the fuel required to get stronger and to build that muscle mass is going to result in a little bit of body fat gain.
Sure.
But I like to say this. The novice period is a very short period of your life. It's 3 to 6 months. And if you buy in and decide to get strong, as we've laid out before, once you're strong, losing body fat after that becomes a much easier proposition.
Absolutely. Well, and the problem is, I don't think it's a problem, but one of the issues that we see with clients is that it's hard. It's hard. Doing that takes time, and it's hard.
Right.
So individuals that come into you and they want to spot reduce, which by the way doesn't work, guys, based on if your body genetically stores more fat on the inside of your hips and on the inside of your thighs, and you don't have thigh gap. By the way, ladies, if you don't have thigh gap, you're perfectly built. And so, just so you know that, I tell my wife, I always like her a little more full figured than less figured.
Right.
And so, but you're not going to be able to spot reduce and take fat off the spots you want to. That's a misnomer, and it's totally false. But the key there is that recognizing that if you'll take the time to train, not exercise, but train, gain some muscle mass along the way while changing your lifestyle nutrition habits, you will see that very quickly you'll not only lose the body fat that you want to lose actually faster, and more importantly, you'll keep it off because you're building, like Trent said, you're building a higher metabolic rate that will support a faster metabolism with more calorie burn, where you can eat more foodstuffs and not gain weight. Right. And so I think that's the key. The key thing to understand is you pay me now or you pay me later.
Right.
One of the two. My recommendation is put the time and effort in up front, which is also going to drive body composition, the way your body looks, and instead of being skinny fat. And that's what a lot of people end up being, skinny fat.
Yeah, and let's be honest here, from an aesthetic perspective, gaining muscle mass, even if you're gaining a little bit of body fat along with that, who doesn't want to fill out a shirt better?
Yeah, you look well, and you look leaner. I tell people all the time, when you gain muscle mass, even if you're gaining a little bit of body fat, you look better cosmetically than you do if you are not strength training and you're losing body fat.
Yeah.
Because there's very little change other than you're getting smaller. And I tell this to ladies all the time. Build a little muscle mass, and that's the butt lift right there. You want to make your butt look like it's less saggy? Guess what? Yeah. Build your glutes, squat, deadlift, and that will naturally lift that up. And what Masters woman doesn't want to have a better butt?
Right. I want a better butt.
Yeah.
I got to hit the beach in a couple months here.
Yeah, we all want a better butt. Whether you're a man or a woman, male or female, everybody wants a better butt. And be reasonably stronger along the way and be healthier too with proper diet. So, we want to become fit. We want to be healthy. We want to look good, but not necessarily weigh less. That's important that we got to understand. Fight that thought process, especially if you're a female and you're listening to our podcast today. Remember that, I hate to say it this way, but I know this goes against what you've been taught in our culture and in our social norms, but it really doesn't matter what you weigh. I see female lifters and female trainees and clients all the time, and they'll weigh 160 and they're 5'7", and I would in no way say that they look overweight or obese. I had a female trainee the other day. She weighs 180 pounds. She did not look overweight one bit, and she's 5'7".
Yeah.
She's extremely muscular, very muscular thighs. She looks great. She's got a hard body. And so the concept there is, what does it matter what you weigh? So I think that's important, and we've really got to fight that with our female clients more than anybody.
Well, and to be fair, I see this problem with young men as well.
Sure.
Increasingly, and
they're becoming less male. That's the problem.
Yeah, from my own personal experience,
they're millennials.
A couple of years ago, here I am, the millennial on the podcast here. So take your shots.
You're like on the very end of the millennials, though. You're card carrying, but you're not a millennial.
Right.
I think being a millennial is a mindset.
It is.
It's a mindset.
Yeah,
I hate to generically term them all, but it's a mindset. It's how you've been trained.
But I have, with personal experience, just a couple of years ago, I was vegetarian for 3 years, and nothing necessarily against vegetarianism, but I was drastically under-consuming protein, drastically under-consuming calories, and I became very underweight. And when I discovered strength training, it was very difficult psychologically to buy into the fact that I needed to gain weight. At first it became, all right, so I'm 5'9". At first it became, all right, let me get up to 160. That's what I used to be when I was in high school. And let me just, I'm okay with that. Then I quickly realized,
underweight meal.
right? I quickly realized I'm like, whoa, I need to be like, how about 185?
Yeah.
But that was a huge deal. I get to 185 and then I realize, man, if I really want to be strong, I'm going to fill out based on my body, my frame, I've got a thicker
good bone
frame.
stock. Yeah.
Right. Wider shoulders. I really need to be 200.
Sure.
But the process psychologically of buying into that weight gain was quite difficult. So it's a problem we all face,
whether male or female. I think there's probably more stigma with females just because of the whole, I don't know. I don't know why that is. Probably because men perpetuate a lot of that too. But I to be honest with you, I like my women a little bit more curvy than super, super thin. So I think that's a perception. Basically, fight that process. Fight that process to think you need to weigh less. Now, if you're a male and you're 5'11" and you weigh 280 and you've got 35% body fat, you might need to weigh less if you're not in a weightlifting sport or you're not in a sport that requires that kind of mass.
Right.
So, I mean, that makes sense. But so let's dial this down a little bit. Some of the things that you can do as a masters is, first of all, to start driving some of that habit change, clean out your pantry. Go into your house, clean out your pantry, get rid of the junk. Get down to single ingredient foods like we talked about, whole foods. I know this podcast is going to sound so simple and basic, and the nutrition experts will poo-poo on it. But guess what? I find that the large majority of my clients, I can't give it a percentage, but I would say 75% and above are just not doing the basics.
Right.
They're not following some basic good lifestyle habits that and setting themselves up for success. They're setting themselves up by failure, by not cleaning out their pantry and doing the basics, going to Whole Foods. Next, plan some meals out and stay, I have a physician friend, an orthopedist that I used to eat lunch with every single week, a couple times a week, real good friend. I still eat with him regularly. And he would just say, food's fuel, Darren. So we basically eat the same thing for lunch every time we hook up and eat lunch. It's the same exact thing every single time. Steamed chicken, usually steamed shrimp, steamed rice, and a salad with this little dressing that we like to put on it at this Chinese restaurant we go to. It is, and some steamed broccoli too. It's the same thing every single time. We don't care. We're there enjoying each other's company, and we're having a good meal that is food for fuel and support of our goals. And then the last thing would be, once you set some basics in place and you're doing the right things, reward yourself every now and then.
Yeah.
That 80-20 rule, I think, is important. I mean, self-denial forever gets people falling off the wagon train. I mean, to deny yourself, to be at one end of the spectrum and another, like we talked about it in the earlier portion of the podcast, to be over here and be so strict, and I would call it a food Nazi, basically, to be way over here and so strict, it's just not sustainable for most people and their quality of life. And to be way over here and eating nothing but junk, we know that that's not sustainable because it's bad for your health.
Right.
Plain and simple,
right.
It's bad for your health.
Yeah, I'll pull in an external source here. So I don't know if you're familiar with, I believe her name is Marie Kondo. She talks about her book is The Japanese Art of Decluttering. Mm-hmm. I probably got that title
feng
wrong.
Shui.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
And so she's a consultant that helps people basically throw stuff away.
Sure.
So working with everyone from people who just live in very small apartments, if they're in a big city like Tokyo or New York City, or people who have hoarding issues, right? And they just have a lot of trouble throwing things away. One of the things I love about her approach is she doesn't talk about throwing things away based on different rules or whatever. She has one simple guideline, and that is you only keep those things which bring you joy.
Sure.
I think a lot about when we talk about habits nutritionally, it's the same thing. If you really if you're just all about gourmet chocolate.
Sure.
Go get yourself some great organic, chocolate, nice and dark, whatever you like, whatever really floats your boat. But if you find yourself, just mindlessly sucking on Jolly Ranchers, well, is that really bringing you any joy? Right. I found myself just the other day, at my workplace, we've got a bucket of M&Ms, and every once in a while I'll just go fill up a cup of M&Ms, and I'll find myself halfway through the thing like, I'm just eating these. I don't even like them. I don't really like M&Ms.
It's an oral fixation.
Yeah. It just, it's kind of mindless. So
Yeah.
those are the easy things to get rid of, and then focus instead on the pleasure of the things you really do enjoy.
Yeah, I like to look at it this way. Food is fuel and for support and body function. So there's that whole, I'm a biologist, so there's that whole biologically driven need for food and the right types of food based on the outcome of what we want our bodies to look, feel, and be like. And then there's the other part of food that's cultural.
Yeah.
It's social. It's enjoyment. It's being out with a friend and having a glass of wine, or being out with a friend and enjoying a good steak and a good baked potato, or, whatever it is, garlic mashed potatoes. Oh, I love those. But it's just, so there's that social component to food too. But we can be, purposeful about that. And I think as masters, we need to be even more purposeful about that, because as we age, our metabolism is dropping. Our muscle mass is dropping. Unless we're training, our muscle mass is dropping over time, and it's dropping more rapidly for those who don't train. Sarcopenia is a bigger issue than for those who do. And so, we want our bodies to not only feel good, but let's face it, people generally do what they do to look good naked. I mean, everybody wants to look good. And so I think that we ought to think about our nutrition for the health and performance benefits that it gives us, and then also looking good as we get older. And so, the last thing is, before we go to our pearls today in our podcast, is, accountability. Find a coach, a good nutrition coach, and find a coach like Robert Santana, who's on Barbell Logic. Find someone who understands strength training, who doesn't use the USDA's food pyramid, who has a good understanding that protein is the building block. That's the number one thing in your diet, and then everything else falls in place from there. Your carbohydrate and your fat load falls in place from there. They need to look at your total basal metabolic rate, your activity-based factor, those things, and someone that you basically can be accountable to.
Right.
Or a friend. Find a friend who you're going to change your nutritional habits and lifestyle with, and work together, and be accountable to someone that you have to record what you do.
Yeah.
Like on something like MyFitnessPal, or you might want to use them. They just had a data breach, but something that you can use, whether it's a written log or software or something that you can report to your coach with.
Right.
I know, like on SSOC, we have Robert Santana and his team of dietitians who are also starting strength coaches. So it's fantastic. Right. You get both worlds right there, and you drive whatever your goal is based on your fitness program.
Yeah, and that's I think that's an important thing. Is regardless of how you're going to integrate nutrition into your lifestyle and your training program, you've got to have some sort of log and some data to work from. We're all about logic and data here.
Sure.
So a food journal doesn't have to be complex.
Right. No.
There's always going to be an element of kind of fudge factor in measuring foods. The nutrition facts or data that we have in our databases, it's not 100% accurate. What we're looking for is simply a log of your food consumption over time. And having that data can make a huge difference. So if you track your macros of what you eat, let's just say every day for 2 weeks, just to get us starting a baseline, sure. Then we have an idea of where to go from there. So if you're under eating protein based on your goals, you can jack it up, and then, maybe track it every other day or every 3 days or something from that point on.
Yeah. And I find when I'm working with a client, we're trying to change their nutrition habits to drive whatever the goal is, weight gain, weight loss, weight maintenance, or body composition change into whatever direction we're going, and they won't do it, they're really not doing the basics. They're really not serious about reaching their goals and doing the basics. So we got to drill down deeper into the real reasons why they're not doing that. We've got to change their lifestyle habits, their habit. And then once we change, and that's why accountability is key there too. So, yeah. Well, I think we're at the end of where we need to be at this podcast on Nutrition 101. We're going to have lots more podcasts on nutrition, but let's go over the 40 Fit Pearls before we close out the show. So, number one, nutrition and diet is based on your education, your habits, and your lifestyle. If you don't understand it, eventually you probably won't do it. And if you don't have a reason that's driving the outcome and you don't have a need or a susceptibility to change, you're probably not going to do it. And that's why most diets fail. You know what? Get rid of the junk in your life. Go into your pantry and get rid of the junk foods. Choose one or two things at a time if you have to, and change slowly. Slowly, a little bit of self-denial helps and will get you on the road to change. The next one, whole foods. Start with whole foods. Reduce your processed sugars. Reduce the high-calorie foods in your diet. You cannot exercise off or train off a bad diet when you want to lose body fat and have body composition change. So go to whole foods. It makes it simple. There's one ingredient in that. It's so much easier and makes it less complex and doable in your lifestyle. Drive your calories with your protein load always. 1 to 1.5 grams or greater normally. And then carbs and fats are based on your body composition goals and where you're trying to reach in your program. You know what? Self-denial all the time leads to unhappiness. We don't want that for you, so 80-20 rule generally seems to work best. You know, once a week, go out with your friends, eat what you want to eat, enjoy life. Hey, you are a master's. You've worked all your life to enjoy the things that you've gained. So enjoy yourself and have a good time. Calorie load drives weight gain. Remember, both on the loss and maintenance side, that if you have basically lower calories in your diet, then you're most likely not going to be gaining weight. You could be losing the wrong type of weight, though, and that could be muscle mass. So make sure you get your protein in. But there is some truth to calories in, calories out. You can't exercise or train off a bad diet, folks. It just doesn't happen. Stop worrying about weight and focus on composition. Ladies out there, we like you a little curvy. Remember that. Stress, lack of sleep, etc., that can affect weight gain or loss too. So try to get your other areas of your life in order so that you're more relaxed and look at the long term. Remember, training as a master's and lifestyle as a master's is all about sustainability here at 40Fit. Food is for building your body and for fuel. And lastly, but not least, get some accountability in your life. Get a coach, a nutrition coach that's highly qualified. Make sure that they are using some of the principles that we talked about today, especially when it comes to the balance of the macronutrients, or a friend who's maybe on the same journey that can support your goals.
All right. Well, thanks, Darren, for running down those pearls. Check us out, as always, at 40fit.com. We also have a growing community at 40Fit Masters Community on Facebook, where we'll be talking about answering your nutrition questions, talking about integrating good nutrition habits into your lifestyle, and doing open workouts and all sorts of events. Leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, whatever your podcast outlet of choice is, and let us know what you think. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time for episode 7.